So I think one of the sad things is that many people don't grasp that one of the reasons I make these videos about LenapeValley Foundation, about Pendle Mental Health, about Bucks County, and about the mental health industry in general is because people are victimized. Okay? Now, I've been victimized by the mental health establishment since I was 7 years old. Okay? The point is that everything has become the mental health establishment. The school system, doctors, pediatricians, everything has become the mental health establishment. And there's no facts really to back up what the majority of what mental health professionals claim. There's no actual facts to back any of it up. So people are victimized based on the imagination of people that are in a position of power, and I would say probably more often than not, a lot of these people, whether they're doing it purposely or not, are victimizing their clients. So this is 5 signs of narcissistic therapists, and this is a problem. People drawn to the field of therapy, I think that a lot of them, a lot of it's very popular to feel that you're empathetic. Now, there are people like me that actually are empathetic. And I do feel for other people, okay? And then there's people that like to say they're empathetic. And these are people that are capable and willing to manipulate people. And it's very, it's very narcissistic these days to claim that you're empathetic. Okay? So, this is what you have to understand. Do you have an ill-informed therapist or a narcissistic therapist? Now, the one thing that you have to understand, my specific therapist at LenapeValley probably was ill-informed and went on something. Okay? However, the doubling down on the lie, and the continued doubling down on the lie, and then acting in a conspiracy with other employees of LenapeValley to cover up the mistakes that she made and the mistakes that her supervisor made, that shows narcissism. That shows the idea that she is above me, okay? That she's more important than me, and that what she's doing is more important than what I'm doing, and she has more of a right to the truth than I do, and that she's not required to tell me the truth because she's just that much more of an important person than I am. Okay? Despite the fact that ethically speaking, she has a responsibility to tell me the truth. Okay? So that's a problem right there. Right there. So, as an author who has corresponded with thousands of abuse survivors, I've written, and that's another thing, this particular therapist, my particular therapist, specialized in counseling abuse survivors, which is, I think, why she claimed that she had vicarious trauma. Later I found out she was actually traumatized. She referred to herself as a trauma survivor. So my point is that her own... See, that's the thing. It's very narcissistic to be a victim these days, to play the victim. That's why I try not to play the victim. But after 20-some years of people screwing with me, you get a little tired of putting up with people's crap. But it's very, if you look at BLM or any of these minority groups or women nonsense or LGBTQIAP+++++ stuff, playing the victim is a very empowering thing to do these days. So, narcissistic therapists take toxicity and invalidation to a whole new level. Unlike ill-informed therapists who inadvertently invalidate their clients due to a lack of knowledge, narcissistic therapists intentionally and maliciously invalidate you to gaslight you further. Why? Because they have an agenda of dismissing, minimizing, and enabling abusive behavior for nefarious reasons, which have more to do with supporting their own character disorder. Therapists who may not be knowledgeable about covert abuse can still have empathy. Now, the thing is, this woman was very aware of covert abuse. She specializes, allegedly, in abuse. And can still have empathy for others and have the capacity to learn and evolve. Narcissistic therapists, like my previous therapist, however, mirror the same form of manipulation tactics as the survivor's original abuser, or in my case, abusers. They possess the same kind of callous lack of remorse, that's why she's never apologized to me, and excessive sense of entitlement, that's why she's never told me the truth. Okay, the authors heard more than a few horror stories from survivors of toxic therapists, who not only invalidate them, but actually participate in abusive behavior. Now remember, what my therapist did was join in on abusing me by explaining to me in an off-the-cuff way that the people harassing me online were harassing me because it was my fault. The people harassing me online were harassing me. Her place as a therapist is not to, literally, she was so frustrated that I refused to believe her. She basically started growling and saying, "Why are they harassing you? There's no justification for their harassment of me." Okay? So this person's also heard of survivors who have dated and have had intimate ties with therapists. As I said, that's nothing. What's funny is dating me actually seems like it would be less unethical than what she actually did. So a survivor, Marnie, tells her she dated a psychotherapist for 14 months. He emotionally abused her at the end, and he beat her up, blah, blah, blah. You have to understand, a lot of therapists, if you know people that have majored in psychology, sociology, or other things dealing with behavior, they're not right in the head. Period. They're not. And the more you get to know them, the more disturbed you realize that these people are. I've noticed that all of the time. I have friends that are therapists. Well, I should say former friends that are therapists. When they don't talk to you anymore, I guess you should consider them former friends. But the point is, they have eating disorders. They have emotional disorders. They have had past attempts at suicide. They have drug addiction, alcohol addiction, while they're actively working as therapists, or have a past of it and are covering up the current abuse or whatever. A lot of them are very abusive, either emotionally abusive or physically abusive towards their partners. I've noticed that a lot. And that's just general therapists. That's not even narcissistic therapists. That's just everyday therapists. Both this person's ex-in-laws were marriage and family therapists and total narcissists. They generally are. They think they know everything. These are chilling reminders that credentials and even a seemingly stellar public reputation cannot make up for an appalling lack of character. Some narcissistic therapists go as far as to continue their horrific deeds in the therapy space with already traumatized clients, which is what happened in my case. It is very important that when you seek a counselor, you find someone who is compatible with you and your needs. This means finding a therapist who is trauma-informed. Now, this is the thing about that. Trauma-informed is a catchphrase that means shit. It means nothing. I was one of the people in charge of creating the trauma-informed curriculum for Pendle Mental Health. Okay, it doesn't mean shit. It means that you tell people how to approach somebody that's a survivor of trauma, what the effects of trauma can be on a person, the individual differences about how trauma affects different individuals differently. This is crap that people have been talking about in therapeutic circles for 100 years. Okay? They violate your boundaries. Like, this is the thing, too. People might not find it odd. This is what's funny. Is with LenapeValley, their excuse was that they have the right to discuss me in supervision. The problem isn't whether or not they have the right to discuss me in supervision. The problem is it ethical, and does that not speak to the inexperience and inability of my therapist to do her job properly? My therapist allegedly has over a decade's experience in the field of therapy, being a therapist. She specializes in abuse, she specializes in trauma, she specializes in all this stuff, but yet apparently her supervisor Googled me, which is what my therapist told me. I still think what my therapist told me is the closest thing to the truth. But she had to bring me up in supervision. Why? Why couldn't she discuss these things with me in an appropriate adult manner? The reason why is because she purposely was gossiping about me, as therapists do. This is something that women do, especially females in the mental health profession. So perhaps the most telling sign you might be dealing with a therapist on the narcissistic spectrum is their continual violation of boundaries, such as Googling me, discussing me, most likely contacting people behind my back, justifying people's abuse of me, justifying people threatening to murder me, justifying people's mistreatment of me, not believing me when I say I'm being stalked, threatened, and harassed, despite the fact that a person that works for the county, a psychiatrist at a third-party place, and my case manager all verified that I was being harassed, threatened, and intimidated. Okay? But yet, they don't believe me. They require proof. That's a type of gaslighting right there. Okay? I already gave proof. They just chose not to look at it. As a therapist, there are certain boundaries one should not cross with clients. Clients have the right to humane care and treatment. They also have the right to their privacy, to confidentiality, to autonomy, to their emotions, to participate actively in their own treatment. And that's the thing. How could I participate actively in my own treatment when I'm not being told the whole truth, or any truth that I'm aware of? I don't know what the truth is. Nobody told me the truth. I was told many contradictory things that were all covered up by other people with other lies that contradicted the other lies. So how can I participate in my own treatment without an accurate understanding of what their concerns are? Okay? Because they were covering up their lies with other lies to protect themselves. An unethical therapist may cross boundaries by causing their clients to become unhealthy and dependent upon them. Now, this happened with, so the only person I have as a support system is my ex-girlfriend. My therapist was very, very insistent that I do everything I can to remove my ex-girlfriend from my life. Now, I had a number of people that actually work in the field of mental health that were telling me, that I know, that I talk to, that were telling me this does not seem like a healthy therapeutic relationship, you need to switch therapists. Now, I believed in this woman. I thought she was doing her best. I thought she was doing a decent job. I thought a lot of it did come down to her own personal trauma because she behaved as a traumatized person. Okay? She acts like a person suffering from severe trauma. Okay? So I never wanted to prejudge her or judge her too harshly. But the fact of the matter is, in retrospect, it is obvious that she was trying to cut off my support system so that I would be more vulnerable when she did what she did. So they may make a habit of inserting themselves into their clients' personal lives outside of therapy space. That never happened. They may financially exploit them by overcharge. That never happened. Even more horrifically, they may even cross boundaries by sexually abusing their clients. That never happened. I'm just putting that out there. I'm not trying to unfairly bully this woman. okay? According to attorney John Weiner, partner at blah, 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 who specializes in therapist abuse cases, this breach of boundaries often occurs when one trespasses what is known as the therapeutic container. The therapeutic container is a term that refers to the way that psychotherapy is supposed to be practiced. There's a whole field of how it's supposed to, the whole book's written on this shit. That is, except in cases of analysis, the therapist should be sitting a reasonable distance away from the patient or client. There should be no physical contact other than a handshake or an occasional non-sexual hug. Sessions should last for set periods of time and should occur in the office. There should be no intentional contact with the patient outside of the therapy office. This allows therapy to be contained. Now, what's funny is, does Googling somebody and then most likely contacting people behind their back about the garbage you found online that they told you about because you kept saying, the person kept telling you that they're being stalked, threatened, and harassed online, and people are spreading untruths about them online, and then they go and they gather that information, take it to their supervisor. It's put all over the agency, and the agency is so concerned that you're participating in crimes, but yet they don't call the police. They launch their own investigation for some reason. I'm at a loss as to what to think in that respect. So a therapist must also maintain his or her boundaries at all times. This means that the therapy must be focused at all times on the client's problems, and not the therapist. The therapist should not reveal any intimate blah, 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 blah. As one survivor, Becky shares with me, now what's funny, they shouldn't share anything about their problems, but yet Ms. Beecham, on her profile, states that she is a survivor of trauma. Okay, so that would make somebody that's also a survivor of trauma go into that session going, wow, this person must really understand me. Now, I can assure you, as a survivor of Miss Beecham's therapy style, she does not understand trauma. I can promise you that. She might understand the textbook version of it. She might understand it firsthand. But if you expect to get help from her, you're not going to get help from her. I can promise you that from my own personal experience. So this person was emotionally and sexually abused, blah, blah, blah. Survivor story, Lois. Okay, so we're going to go through here. Let me skip to the next one. They lack empathy for your pain and engage in victim blaming. Remember when I stated that she blamed me for being harassed. Despite me telling this agency for over 5 years I was being stalked, threatened, and harassed. It was my fault. Everything's my fault. Okay? And I need to accept that and never talk about it. She would never discuss it with me. Okay? So I wasn't allowed to discuss anything like this in therapy. She would always change the subject to something else. So in therapy space, when you emotionally invalidate your client's trauma, which she did every time I brought it up, force them to prematurely forgive their abusers, especially when your therapist is one of your abusers, without processing the trauma, which I can't process the trauma. I don't have any information because it's being withheld by my abusers, who are the staff at LenapeValley Foundation. Trauma survivors benefit greatly from empathy of an ethical professional. Unfortunately, that's not what I received. They join forces with your abuser in gaslighting you and pathologizing you. This goes back to Ms. Beecham stating things like when I was explaining. Now, Ms. Beecham is also a criminal justice. She has a degree in criminal justice as well as a degree in therapy, a degree in social work, and a degree, well, not a degree, but she's also worked as a combat medic. So I was bringing up how, according to the FBI, the people stalking, threatening, and harassing me online most likely are on the autism spectrum. Ms. Beecham also worked with autistic people. Now, Ms. Beecham goes, in a very childish way, when I brought this up, instead of just discussing or saying, maybe I don't want to discuss this, she goes, maybe you have an autism spectrum disorder, in a very snotty way. And she would do that a lot about things. One of the things that I thought was funny, it was almost like she was jealous of the fact that I could think at a higher level than her. And she would say things like, well, you know, because you have time to think about things, other people don't have time to think about things. They can only worry about how much coffee is. And you have time to philosophize about things. Well, you know, other people don't. It was almost like she was jealous of me in a lot of ways. But that's the thing, is she would join forces with the people harassing me and try to justify what they were doing. Okay? That's a problem. That's a problem. If she thought I was doing the things that she claims she thought I was doing, or she claims that her supervisor thought I was doing, she's required by law to call the police. As a therapist, her concern is my mental and emotional well-being. Okay? If she's concerned that something is going on that's a legal thing that involves the commission of a crime, she is required, particularly that crime, she is required to contact the authorities. I know this because I've already worked in mental health. I know how it works. So because abusers tend to support other abusers and paint their victims as perpetrators, see? Because abusers tend to support other abusers and paint their victims as perpetrators, as everyone at LenapeValley has done. Remember the letter I received from LenapeValley saying they were afraid of me. I've done literally nothing for them to be afraid of me except exposing them. It's no mystery why a narcissistic therapist would actively participate in gaslighting their victim. They isolate you from outside support. Remember, I explained that she tried to cut off the one support I had in my life. And the reason why was to make me more vulnerable. I see that now. I did not see that then. They are haughty and condescending and contemptuous. Remember, I said she was haughty. Maybe you have an autism spectrum disorder. Maybe it's your fault. Maybe you should consider why. Maybe, why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? You know what I mean? Or you have time to philosophize. That's why you can think the way you think. No, I can think the way I think because I'm actually intelligent instead of just indoctrinated. So having a validating, empathetic professional, unfortunately, almost none of us do when we try to receive mental health services, and if we do, they're usually pretty stupid, on your healing journey can be a life-saving and essential. It can be life-saving and essential. It is important, however, to conduct thorough interviews in your search. See, people can't do this. People don't have access to this type of shit unless they're multi-billionaires. The right therapist can make a positive difference. The wrong therapist can at best invalidate and traumatize you. I received that and then some. So this is how to recognize a bad therapist. Now this is the thing, you have to understand. These are a lot of these things that I was looking for, it just didn't seem to happen. In retrospect, I can see it. Talking to people that warned me about her, I can see it when I was explaining things to them. So, she was not a sexual predator as far as I'm aware. Okay, I do think she was attracted to me, but I don't think she was sexually predatory. How to deal with a potential... Now, this is for people that are dealing with this. This is not something that I was dealing with. If you think your therapist is flirting with you, say something like, "This feels too flirtatious to me." If your therapist is very focused on your sex life and asking for details, you can ask, "How is this relevant to their problems?" If your therapist frequently touches you or offers a hug and it feels unnecessary or inappropriate, it probably is. Your therapist is not legally allowed to date you or see you outside of your session. If you think, not legally, I think is a bit of a stretch. Not ethically allowed is probably a better term. They're not going to go to prison for it, okay? And as I said, I know many therapists that have dated their clients and things like that. My point is, again, I want to make sure that people understand she did not try to sexually predate me, okay? Keep that in mind. I'm not trying to make her look any worse about things that she didn't do. Poorly trained. Now, what's funny is, this is what you have to understand. Being poorly trained and incompetent are two different things. There are people that have virtually no training that are very good at their jobs. And then there are people that are overly trained that are absolutely horrendous at their jobs. Keep that in mind. So most people who go for therapy are unaware that most types of licensed mental health professionals in the United States are allowed to do psychotherapy without actually studying any form of therapy well enough to really know how to do it properly. A lot of therapists are simply winging it. I think many people figure that out when they go to therapy. And if they don't, yeah. I think it's pretty obvious when you go to a therapist that they're winging it. Resistant Thomas and his perplexed therapist. This should be a funny story. So Thomas came to therapy. This is a story about somebody with a person in the first session, blah, blah, blah. He was unusually resistant to any interventions or suggestions. He tended to ignore the therapist's feedback and evaded most of their attempts to have him stay on topic. They knew Thomas had been in therapy before, so they asked him how that therapy had gone because theirs was going nowhere. Thomas said, I defeated my last therapist. I defeated my last therapist. Yeah, this is a guy that probably shouldn't be going to therapy if he considers it a contest of wills. That's not a healthy therapeutic relationship. So, yeah, you can read this on your own. That's comical. Yeah, if you see meeting with a therapist a contest of wills, you probably should work on yourself somehow before even going to therapy. Therapy is a partnership between the therapist and the client to get the client well. How do you avoid a poorly trained therapist? Fact of the matter is, you can't. Because, like I said, even if they're well-trained, they can be incompetent as all hell. So this is fairly simple. Look for a framed certificate. That means nothing. If you do not see one, I've met people that have PhDs in psychology, okay, that aren't exactly the best at performing psychotherapy. Okay, I know people that are PsyDs and PhDs that are amazing at performing therapy. I knew one woman at my previous position that had an associate's in therapy and in psychology back from the 1960s, and she was extremely effective with her clients. Okay. Look up that therapy on the internet and check if it is relevant to your problems. These are things that you can't do if you're receiving therapy from a setting like I was. After getting this information, ask your therapist any questions, blah, 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 blah. Inexperienced. Again, experience does not matter. My therapist was quite experienced, and she was completely incompetent or aggressively predatory. She was either an aggressive, predatory narcissist, or she was very incompetent. I don't know what else to think. How do you avoid inexperienced therapists? What degrees do you hold? Again, that means nothing. Are you still in training? That means nothing. How many years have you been doing therapy? That really doesn't really mean very much. Are you in supervision with a more experienced therapist? Now, what's funny is my therapist was in supervision with a less experienced, less competent, at least on paper, therapist. Most therapists are well-intended. I tend to doubt that. I think maybe when they start out, but I don't think after a while. So this is the author, Eleanor Greenberg. She's a PhD in the Gestalt therapy, blah, 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 blah. So what is a predatory narcissist? This is important because I think a lot of therapists fall into this category of what a predatory narcissist is. Predatory narcissists are narcissists that always go out of their way to inflict as much damage as possible without even thinking twice about the harm they are causing. How to talk to a narcissist. Here's exactly what you should be saying to your narcissist. These categories typically include the more generally accepted ones, overt and covert. Okay, so grandiose narcissist. What's funny is, if you learn about narcissism, I think all narcissists fall into these categories. Okay, each of these. So a grandiose narcissist is the one who is always on the lookout for admiration. They need to be the center of attention. Oh, gee, I think I remember one of them. One of them ruined my life a while back, huh? And they love to be flaunted. Grandiose narcissists are often seen as belligerent, arrogant individuals who have a heightened sense of entitlement. They come across as obnoxious to certain people. However, they can also be charming and charismatic. I think I remember one of them. A young lady from Argentina, if I remember correctly. Vulnerable narcissist is a quiet, different form of the grandiose narcissist. They are hypersensitive to any kind of criticism, blah, 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 blah. It's important that you don't confuse borderline with vulnerable narcissist. What is predatory narcissism? Predatory narcissism can be best described as a predatory type of behavior that is exhibited by a narcissist who is in a position of power, such as my therapist. This could be in the form of their occupation, such as my therapist, such as a CEO of a company or manager of a department, or it could be in the form of them being in a relationship with someone that they can control. Many empaths, now this is the thing. This is the problem that you have. There's people like me that want to help everybody. Okay, so many empaths instinctively think that a narcissist needs a partner or somebody you are very close to. However, one shouldn't overlook the workplace. Business environments, so this is the thing. What you need to look at here is the workplace. Previous supervisor at Pendle Mental Health. Now, luckily, enough people spoke up about her that she did eventually get, tossed out. But because of the narcissistic work environment at Pendle, it took many, many, many years, and it took somebody literally stating that she was the problem on Google. They literally said, she is the problem with this agency. She is why everybody is leaving. So business environments are prime breeding grounds for narcissists, and these narcissists can behave in a predatory manner depending on a couple of things. Some organizations simply do not realize the cost when they lose employees due to predatory narcissism. Or in Pendle Mental Health's case, they just didn't care. It just wasn't, they didn't care because everybody at the top was friends with one another. Recognizing predatory narcissism. The predatory narcissist will often use intimidation, coercion, and manipulation to get what they want. You'll notice that a lot with the people that harass me online. That's how they work things, okay? So it's intimidation, coercion, and manipulation. They'll try to blackmail people, emotionally blackmail people, and they desire to control. But you have to remember, my therapist, instead of discussing what was going on online or anything like that, she immediately took the side of the people stalking, threatening, and harassing me, despite it being well known by her agency and her that this was going on. She decided to take the side of the people stalking, threatening, and harassing me, despite it being verified what was going on by a psychiatrist, by a case manager, and by a person from the county. So it's very, now guilt trips. This was tried by Miss Beecham in session, because I said, I got frustrated with her, and I said, you know, she was trying to explain to me that the problem was that the therapists at LenapeValley suffered from they do suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, but no, she was saying that they suffer from vicarious trauma, and that was her excuse for why they made such bizarre, sweeping judgments of me. Now, and I frustratedly said that's why I hate therapy, is most therapists are traumatized women. And then her eyes started to tear up, and she got mad at me, and she said, well, thank you for blah, 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 prejudging me, or some shit like that. And I immediately apologized to her after session, because I wasn't actually judging her. But she took it as me judging her because she's a narcissist. I wasn't judging her. I was judging who I thought was her supervisor. I really don't know what happened, because nobody has been honest with me enough. But I'm still going with what Ms. Beecham told me, which was that her supervisor had Googled me, found the stuff, and that's what happened. I don't know. That makes the most sense. So I was assuming that what I was saying would have been taken as I had meant it about her supervisor, about her supervisor's supervisor, and about the other people in the workplace, not about her. I actually held her in fairly high regard, but because she is a narcissist, she took that as a direct attack at her. And also because she's a survivor of trauma, she took that as a direct attack at her. Now, I didn't know that she was a survivor of trauma. I had assumed so due to her behaviors, okay? She behaved like a survivor of trauma, okay? Now, that can be difficult to parse out, too, because a lot of women act like survivors of trauma, even if they've never been traumatized, because of the kind of world we live in. Everybody acts as though they've been traumatized. So threats. The predatory narcissist may use threats of violence, abandonment, or blackmail in order to control their partner. Now, obviously the people online have threatened to murder me, have actually vandalized my property, have threatened to go to the police about me, have gone to the police about me, and things of that nature. So that's true. With my therapist, she would always try and threaten abandonment, that she didn't want to work with me anymore. Okay? They may devalue and discard you as if you meant nothing, which is essentially how my sessions ended. Okay? That's why I discontinued services. And that's also, if you notice, that's what happened with the young lady in Argentina. Predators, by way of nature, prey on those that are weaker and more vulnerable. That's the thing. She thought I was weaker and more vulnerable. I guess I gave her a little bit of a surprise there. Oftentimes, the victims are either ashamed or have been abused to the point where they are afraid to seek help. And that was me. I was afraid to seek help because every time I sought help, people were saying I was crazy. I was crazy. Despite all the evidence, I was crazy. And then Ms. Beecham joins in. You're crazy. You're crazy. You're crazy. She didn't use those words because she's going to take that personally. She doesn't use the word crazy. She uses the word, you've got a lot to work on. That's a substitute for you're crazy. If you recognize any of these signs in someone that you know, it's important to reach out for help. It can be very dangerous to be in a relationship with a predatory, woke narcissist. Oh, and she was very woke. Although it will never be easy, if you are the victim of a predatory narcissist, it's important to find the strength and courage to protect yourself from further abuse. Dealing with a predatory narcissist. If you are in a relationship with a predatory narcissist, it is important to reach out for help. And it's equally important to know that others have walked in your shoes. And that's one of the reasons I'm putting this out there. I want other people that are being victimized by LenapeValley or any therapist, but mostly LenapeValley, that, they're not alone and that they should feel comfortable in speaking out and taking to social media. They should take to Facebook, they should take to BitChute, they should take to Rumble, they should take to YouTube, they should take to Google, they should take to everything they can, everyone at LenapeValley that's being mistreated, and speak out about this organization and the way it operates, because it's dangerous to the public. Okay, there was one gentleman tried to swat me. Okay, and that's witnessed. He tried to swat me. He was trying to get the police to kill me. Okay, by no fault of the police, he was trying to give the police false information about me. Final thoughts. If you've ever been unlucky enough to find yourself in the presence of a predatory narcissist, I feel for you. Okay, this is the final thoughts. That's unimportant. So this dude calls himself Narc Survivor. He has a channel on YouTube. Check it out. He's not a professional, I don't think, but it's worth looking. What's funny is my therapist was very much against life coaching because, life coaches do better than therapists 9 times out of 10 without the big bills. So if they are currently preying on some unsuspecting victim, they are plotting or working on some plan of action. They target people who are at a state of happiness, progression, or success, which they are envious of, blah, blah, blah. You can read this on your own. I do encourage you to follow this guy on YouTube. So this is 3 signs of an abusive therapist. Let's take a look here. An abusive therapist might use gaslighting to confuse you. Yes, that happened pretty much every session. Okay, this is about what to do when your therapist abuses you. An abusive therapist will take advantage of your vulnerability. Yes, she did that. An abusive therapist may seem like the perfect fit, and she did. She did seem like the perfect fit. So, I can't diagnose, You can read this on your own. This is actually a conversation between 2 people. This is what I had to learn with self-compassion. I had to learn that therapy isn't going to get me well. And in fact, I had to accept the fact that I might never get well. But I have to have self-compassion and understand that what's important is that I don't get worse. And therapy, or I should say, irresponsible therapists were making me worse. Okay, this is 5 signs of a bad therapist. Makes unwanted physical contact. Did not happen with me. Okay, that didn't happen between she and I. Just so you're aware. But you can read this on your own. Blurs professional boundaries in other ways, such as Googling me, getting all freaked out, allegedly. I don't even know if she was freaked out or if she was working with the people that were harassing and stalking me all along. I really don't know, and I can't know because nobody's telling me the truth. Okay? Shares your information with other people. I am almost 100% sure that she contacted a couple people about me. Okay? Or at least her supervisor did. But I won't know because nobody's telling me anything. Keeps vital information from you. Exactly. Everything important to me to understand why these people came to these psychotic conclusions they came to has been kept from me. And then what they did is they backtracked and denied that they had come to those original conclusions despite witnesses and documentation proving otherwise. Offer services they aren't qualified to provide. Now, I wouldn't say that, but, well, the thing is, what is qualification? It can look good on paper, but in real life, it might not be it might not really be that great. Most therapies are unproven. In fact, I think pretty much all mental health therapies are unproven. So, I mean, does it really matter? So what is a therapist's role? Okay. So let's look at this. So what are the duties of a therapist? So let's see here. Helping clients reflect on issues to make positive changes. She refused to help me reflect on the things that had happened that were the result of her and her supervisor's mental health problems. Referring clients to other therapies. A therapist's role includes working collaboratively with clients to identify beneficial goals and interventions, yada, yada, yada. Keeping up any confidential records. Well, I guess it helps if they're not really confidential and you can just share them with whoever the hell you want, which is probably what she did. Group therapy is always fun. So, she was a clinical social worker. These practitioners offer services to diverse populations in both urban and rural settings. They often engage with families, blah, 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 blah. Interpersonal skills. Their careers revolve around understanding and helping people. Therapists need strong interpersonal skills, or in Miss Beecham's case, a complete lack of interpersonal skills. Communication skills. Well, I guess it's a communication skill to withhold any communication from somebody, because nothing works something out like the silent treatment. Trustworthiness. Oh, yeah. That's a good one there. She was very trustworthy. She was trustworthy to the people harassing me, that she would work with them to belittle, harass, and make me far worse than I was. Empathy. Ah, yeah. Not having any empathy. That's critical thinking skills. This is the best. Critical thinking skills, like being able to understand that when somebody is telling you, or your agency, for over 5 years that you're being stalked, threatened, and harassed, when you've been erroneously 302'd into a mental hospital by the same agency, and the 302 was thrown out by the attending psychiatrist because he agrees with the person. He agreed with me that I was being stalked, threatened, and harassed. Or maybe when the county contacts these people and says, oh, by the way, this guy's being stalked, threatened, and harassed. And when my case manager backs me up, maybe, you should have the critical thinking ability to go, maybe I shouldn't just take what I see on YouTube at face value. Maybe not everything on the internet's true. Now this is why I kept cutting her a break. The importance of self-care with therapists. I wanted to believe that her problems were her problems, and that's what led to her inadequacy as a therapist. I can't do that anymore. So, is therapy confidential? In almost every instance, it's supposed to be confidential. Okay? Unless you're a threat to somebody. Okay? That's why this nonsense was so uncalled for. What are the limits of confidentiality? For your own safety, there are some exceptions to the rule. It's not just your safety, it's also the public safety. When it comes to confidentiality in therapy, generally these rules have to do with the well-being of the patient or people in the patient's life. For example, therapists are required to report if a patient is a threat to themselves or others. This may mean the patient has threatened suicide, is repeatedly harming themselves, or has threatened to harm someone else, okay? In this case, the therapist may recommend hospitalization. Now, this is if the person is a threat to anyone. I was not a threat to anyone. I didn't threaten to harm myself. I didn't threaten to harm anyone else, okay? But yet, I was perceived as though I was a harm to someone. And there was never any clarification on that. So, that's the thing. Additionally, therapists are also required to report cases of ongoing child abuse or neglect. Now, that's what the point is. If they believed what they said they believed, what they told me and what they told my case manager, her and her supervisor, they are required by law to contact law enforcement. Didn't happen. It didn't happen. HIPAA and rules of confidentiality in therapy. When you are talking to your family, HIPAA allows your therapist to talk with your family about your mental health treatment in a variety of ways. If you are a person incapable of making decisions and want your family to be involved in your treatment, HIPAA allows your therapist to share your information. When you are at a mental health appointment, if you are seeing a mental health care professional for prescription medication, HIPAA allows for some information to be shared with the family you may have present. For example, if there are warning signs your spouse needs to know in regard to your medication. When you are incapacitated, if you are unable to make decisions for yourself, that's why they attempted to 302 me, so that they could share shit. Either because you are unconscious or deemed not of sound mind, then your therapist may use their own reasonable judgment to share pertinent information. So what is gaslighting? Gaslighting is a type of emotional abuse. Okay, someone who is gaslighting will try to make a targeted person doubt their perception of reality. Like when they deny that they said and did things that they said and did despite me having a number of witnesses and documentation to prove that. The gaslighter may convince the target that their memories are wrong or that they are overreacting to the event, like when Ms. Beecham told me people are, this is being blown out of proportion. The abuser may then present their own thoughts and feelings as the real truth, as was done. What is gaslighting? Gaslighting is an abusive tactic aimed to make a person doubt their own thoughts and feelings. The abuse is often subtle at first. For example, if a person is telling a story, the abuser may challenge a small detail. The person may admit, and this is the problem with therapists. One thing therapists are professional gaslighters. They're exquisite at it because they have so much practice at it. A lot of times they'll use gaslighting to get people to agree with therapies and things that they wouldn't ordinarily agree with. Gaslighting techniques to watch out for: withholding, refusing to listen to any concerns or pretending not to understand them, like when Ms. Beecham said she doesn't know what I want from her. Example: I don't have time to listen to this nonsense. Countering, the questioning the target's memory. An abuser may deny the events occurred in the way the target remembers. This happened when I was on the phone with Ms. Beecham and my case manager. See, the previous day she had stated that she was very concerned about the nurse that I found attractive. She also seemed very jealous of the nurse. And what happened was, she had stated that I was making things up until I challenged her on the fact that, no, I'm not making anything up. And instead of admitting that I was telling the truth, she just fell silent. That's the problem, is a lot of times it's the silent treatment you're getting. And I'm going to go into the silent treatment. So, forgetting, denial, pretending to forget events. They did this when they pretended that I never signed a release for my case manager, and they were not aware of my case manager's existence, despite the fact despite the fact that they're the ones that wrote the referral for me to have him on my caseload, and I signed numerous releases for them to speak to him. Blocking or diversion, changing the subject. This would happen every time in therapy when I tried to clarify or gain clarification of what actually happened. Trivializing, asserting that a person is overreacting to hurtful behavior. This was common. This was a common theme. How to fight gaslighting. Don't take responsibility for other people's actions. The other person may claim you provoked the abuse and that's what happened. The other person who took the side of my harassers, well, why are they harassing you? Why are they harassing you? That's what she said. That's not an appropriate stance for a therapist to take. Don't sacrifice yourself to spare their feelings. I had to do this in every therapy session. Remember your truth, or in my case, the truth. I have facts to back up what I'm saying. Do not argue on their terms. If the other person is fabricating facts, you are unlikely to have a productive discussion. You may spend all your energy debating what is real instead of making your point. This is why I ended therapy with her. I couldn't do it. Prioritize your safety, and this is ultimately why I cut off therapy. Gaslighting often makes targets doubt their own intuition, but if you feel you are in danger, you can always leave the situation. That's what I did. Remember, you're not alone. Why do people gaslight others? One of the most common reasons people gaslight is to gain power over others. This need for domination may stem from narcissism or antisocial personality or other issues. Like most cases of abuse, gaslighting is about control. Effects of gaslighting. Gaslighting can have catastrophic effects for a person's psychological health. The process is often gradual, chipping away the person's confidence and self-esteem. Gaslighting is an insidious form of abuse that thrives on uncertainty, which is why nothing has been clarified and nothing will be clarified, because they want me uncertain. A person can grow to mistrust everything they hear, feel, and remember. Okay? Gaslighting can also affect a person's social life. The abuser may manipulate them into cutting ties with friends and family. Hence, my therapist wanted me to discontinue communication with my ex-girlfriend. It can lead to depression, post-traumatic stress, codependency. Recovering from gaslighting, a survivor may benefit from reforming any relationships they pulled back from, blah, 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 blah. So the silent treatment, signs and how to respond to it. Okay, so let's see. What is the silent treatment? The silent treatment is a refusal to verbally communicate or communicate at all, often as a means of punishment or emotional manipulation or control. Okay? This is what happens a lot with people like my former therapist, like my former friend from Argentina. Okay? Why does my partner use the silent treatment? There are several reasons why a person resorts to using the silent treatment. First, they often may not know how to manage their feelings. They could be experiencing significant pain and feel emotionally overwhelmed and flooded. They might also have experienced childhood trauma. In the case of my therapist, I don't know if it was in childhood, but she did state that she was a trauma survivor. Okay? Some reasons why your partner may rely on the silent treatment: they have poor communication skills and don't know how to express their needs or emotions. That's pretty sad if a therapist is like that. They struggle with control issues. They are not self-aware enough about their use of the silent treatment to make changes. You are in a trauma bond relationship. They have an avoidant detachment style. What's funny is the trauma bond relationship is what Ms. Beecham stated was the situation with me and my ex-girlfriend. They have an avoidant attachment style. They may be repressing their emotions. So a lot of that is, what you need to understand is, a lot of therapists project their problems onto the client and to the client's relationships, and they kind of live vicariously through the client. They have post-traumatic stress disorder. As you note, she said she was a survivor of trauma. Now, I also have post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. They modeled this type of behavior from a caretaker. They are experiencing emotional flooding. It's their primary coping mechanism. How to identify the silent treatment is pretty obvious. For example, you and your partner argue about plans, blah, 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 blah. They blatantly and frequently ignore you. They are silent for extended periods of time. You never know when it will end. They talk to other people, but not you. You feel like you are walking on eggshells. You try to talk to them, but they don't respond to you. You feel punished by their silence. They don't attempt to communicate their feelings to you. They use stonewalling tactics. In using the silent treatment abuse, they use it as a manipulation tactic to control the situation or conversation. They know it bothers their partner or spouse, or in this case, therapy recipient, so they continue to do it. They use it as a form of passive-aggressive communication. It lasts for an inordinate amount of time, for example, 6 months. It leaves the person receiving it feeling more anxious, isolated, and alone. It forces the person to reconcile with their abuser. It begins to erode a person's self-worth or self-esteem. The perpetrator of the silent treatment explicitly blames the partner, or in this case, therapy recipient. This is just ways to set boundaries and bullshit like that. But this is a key thing to understand here. Number one, don't take it personally, and I don't. Her mental health issues are her mental health issues. And the key is to stay calm and not get frustrated. And that's all for this video.